Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Buroker, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
I'm Joe Lallo.
All right, and we have a kind of a twist for you this week. We're going to be interviewed by a winner of the contest. You guys may remember I was on here with Jay Thorn, Joanna Penn, and Zach Bohannon a month or two ago, and we ran a little contest to go along with our American Demon Hunters novel, and people actually entered that wanted to come on the show and ask us questions, so we appreciate that. And our guest this week is Lon Varnadore. He's the author of one novel, Mostly Human, and some serials that I guess let me have you tell us about yourself and your novels, Lon.
All right. I'm Lon Varnadore. I've been doing writing for a little bit. The big novel that I have is Mostly Human. It's a sci-fi noir set on Mars. I have 2 or 3 other books that have been written that I had to pull off for various reasons. And I have 3 serials that are started up. One is a sort of supernatural Western, urban fantasy, and military sci-fi. The supernatural fantasy is Risen, the urban fantasy is called Purgatory, and the military sci-fi is called Starkiller Chronicles.
All right, sounds cool. Well, as I mentioned, Lon is going to be interviewing us, and we're hoping that his questions will be the kind of thing that might be useful to everyone, or to a lot of you at least. We don't always know what to talk about when it's just us, so we take some guesses and answer listener questions. But I guess, you've got a list prepared, I think. So let me go ahead and turn things over to you, and I guess all 3 of us can take turns answering,
Okay.
if that works.
All righty. These are in no particular order. Do you think that there's still a viability in the perma-free or 99-cent model?
I'll be certainly address that, since I've got 3 series, and I've got my series starter of every single one of them is perma-free. And trust me, as what you're trying to do here is you're trying to get more you get your book out there in the hands of everybody. So if you make it free of charge, obviously people are going to typically give a free book a try. And obviously, if they like it, you're going to snag them with it, and they're going to check out the rest of the book in the series. And if you have, like in my case, if you have multiple series, they will typically look at your book catalog and say, okay, I really like this. He's got a couple more. Let's go ahead and check some of those things out. So typically, if you can snag them on the one, you can usually see a bump in sales in every single one of the other books you have there. So for me, definite strength for me to have those perma-free titles in my library.
Okay.
Am I going next?
Whoever.
All right. We'll get an order going here eventually.
Okay.
So I think that the perma-free can still be useful, especially I hear that it works well in Kobo and some of the other stores for getting people into the series. We've been hearing that on Amazon, it's not that it's not useful, but you're really going to have to drive people to it. It's kind of the days. I mean, I would say actually we just took a box set off that had been up for 2 years, and it was still getting about 25 downloads a day as a perma-free, even rank 5,000 in the Amazon store or something like that. So it's not totally dead. Some of the things that have happened is that, with Kindle Unlimited, a lot of the people who are kind of bargain seekers, they read a lot, and so they don't want to pay full price for everything. We theorize that they're not looking as much at the free lists, because they can just borrow whatever they want, basically, that's in Kindle Unlimited for their $10 a month. So that's kind of their new free list, and it's a little more visible. That's another thing, is back in the day, the free list used to be, you could kind of see it right alongside the paid list, the top 100s in the various categories. And now you have to click over, and depending on what you're browsing, and I've not even been able to find the free list from time to time. So I think that's sort of what people are talking about when maybe they're saying it's not as effective, is that it's a little harder for people to find those free books on Amazon in particular. So it can still be a strategy. I've still got 2 of my older series, book 1s, as permanently free, and they still, cycle people in there, I guess, and I do advertise them from time to time. If I'm thinking, wow, the sales on this series are really horrible, I've been ignoring it for too long, sometimes a little plug on the book 1 perma-free can be a good idea. For my newer stuff, I'm going more with the 99-cent launch, and then if I had written something to market, which we've talked about, none of us here are very good at doing, I would consider doing a 99-cent launch for the first week or two, and then bumping it up to $3.99 for something that's in Kindle Unlimited, because you get those borrows counting towards your sales ranking. And I think most people are probably borrowing it if they don't know you, but it doesn't seem to matter a lot for some people for a story that's really hits all the right tropes and stuff, whether it's 99 cents or $3.99. I found for myself with my stuff that's a less to market, the 99-cent model seems to work better. People are willing to try it more. Whereas $3.99, I've definitely seen a drop in the sales when I've raised the price. So, and in my case, I'm always writing like 6 or 8 books in a series. So having the first one at 99 cents or even perma-free it's not really that big a deal, especially after I've got several out and people can go on and buy the other ones. And I'll let Joe talk.
Yeah, I agree that it's not as automatic as it was. Like it used to be, having a free book was a form of promotion, and now having a free book is a thing you can use in promotions. But I still do the first in every one of my series is still free. And, you know, I still get plenty of emails from people I happen to know must be seeking free books, because they're always sort of interested if they can get the others for free in any given way. So there are still free book seekers out there. But it's more of a tool now than just the way in which you funnel people in. And, yeah, so it's no longer the way that you sell your books, but a way that you help sell your books.
That was good. That should be in a fortune cookie.
Yeah.
And if you want to interrupt us, Lon, go ahead. I'll just keep talking. If you want clarification or something, just throw it out there and I'll shut up.
All
She
right.
likes to talk.
Hey, not a problem. Are there subgenres of science fiction fantasy that even indie authors aren't touching? Or do you see more of them forging their own paths to success?
I've personally seen a lot of these little smaller subgenres that are popping up from time to time as they start becoming more popular. I haven't really noticed any subgenres that indies haven't touched, because hey, us indies, we're everywhere.
Yeah, I kind of think too that indie authors are more likely to be in these little small niches, whereas maybe it's traditional publishers that won't touch them because they're too out there and too small. And you know, with so many of us now, if you can think up some interesting cross-genre thing, I think you'll find people that are out there writing it, and there may be readers. I don't know, is there more to answer to that? Are they forging their own path? Yeah, I definitely think people are, and it's kind of interesting that you'll see people like the lit RPG people we've got on. I think that's a good example of forging their own path. It's not a genre or a subcategory in Amazon yet, but it's definitely, they've found a following, and maybe eventually it will become a subcategory. I've definitely seen things like military fantasy, science fiction romance, fantasy romance, things that were not originally categories, even steampunk. In the last few years, they've become categories on Amazon. Some of the other stores lag behind, and you know, it may just be, here's the science fiction section. And I think that's one of the reasons we talk about visibility being easier on Amazon, is they do eventually add categories if there's enough interest in it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's sort of the other way around with indies. I think it's the bigger genres, and more specifically, the only subgenre you're not likely to find an indie in is one where we're not allowed in, like licensed stuff. Like obviously, Kindle Worlds is a thing that exists now, but Kindle Worlds are still a fairly limited number of franchises you can be a part of. So really, like if you look at any sci-fi list, you're going to see a lot of in-universe stuff for Star Wars and Star Trek, and you're not going to see any indie names on those. And I think really that's the last place where you won't find any indies.
I'll add too that it's tough for children's stuff. If it, you know, fantasy, sci-fi, middle grade, you will find indies, but it's a tough sell because we're mostly ebook, digital, and that audience is mostly still reading from paper and getting stuff from the bookstores. So that's a tough one to crack as an indie author.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of questions here. Your opinion on serials or KU versus wide?
Well, we'll address serials first, and actually, I'm not the one to answer that because I haven't done any serials. But Lindsay, I know you have.
I've actually only done one serial. I did it with my pen name, and it worked pretty well. What I would recommend doing is, if you're going to do one now, like I feel like they were maybe a little more trendy a few years ago, and now people are just like, oh, screw serials. I'm just going to write a whole bunch of books in 4 weeks and launch the whole series. But no, I think it can still work. You have to really, I think part of the magic of doing a serial is the rapid release. I think it's going to be tough to, I noticed with yours that you've got a couple different starter ones out there, and it seems like it can be a way to gain momentum and have something to release every week or two. When I did it with the pen name, I broke about 120,000 words up into 6 sections, installments, I guess you would call them. I made the first one about 30,000 words long. That was by far the longest one because I really wanted there to be time to build up the tension, get to know the characters, and for people to become invested in it. I think when you go shorter, that's one of the challenges, is that, after only maybe 10,000 words, people aren't in love with the characters yet and haven't gotten enough time yet to really become invested. So I think that worked pretty well. And then I had some shorter ones going on later in the series. I launched them all at 99 cents, figuring that basically that's a book, a fairly decent sized book, 120,000 words. So if they added it all up and bought it that way, it was only going to be $5.95 or so. And then I made it $4.95 eventually when I put out the combination. And I feel like everybody's like, oh, I hate serials, but I had quite a few people following along, so it seemed to work. And like I said, I did every 2 weeks. I think looking back, I'd probably do that again every 1 week or every 2 weeks. And I'd wait a little longer before releasing the kind of collection. I did that pretty much as soon as I had the 6th one out. I felt like, oh, people are going to hate this 99-cent thing and just want the big one. But I think it can work. I think it's maybe not a bad strategy if you're not a super fast writer, which most people honestly aren't, until they maybe have done 10 novels and starting to get to the point where they can do it full time, or, every now and then somebody comes out of nowhere and can just crank them out. But most people who are still working day jobs and have kids and all that stuff don't have as much time. So it can definitely be a way to have a lot of things to release, even though it's basically one big story. I would be careful. Like, I don't think you can just break up a novel. I really had to, this was science fiction romance, so it's going to be different than epic fantasy or space opera, but I really had to make sure there was a, romantic tension, kind of something going on in each installment, as well as plot tension, something going on. And I tried to cliffhanger it in a way that in a novel you might not have so many natural cliffhangers.
Yeah, I've tried serials 3 different times, and one time I just chickened out and made it a book, and you could tell it was supposed to be a serial because there's a lot of reintroducing plot points at the beginning of each chapter. And the other 2, I took a weird path with it because I'm not a fast writer. I write longer books, and I don't have the huge word counts that a lot of people do. But because of that, I want to keep the readers engaged, so I was trying to do sort of a weekly release, and I didn't sell it. I just had once a week on Wattpad for the first time I tried it, and now I'm trying it again right now, where it'll be once a week on Tumblr, just a place that I can put lots of text. I will put out a sort of almost rough draft chapter of a story that I'm working on, and then, because to some extent, just as rapid book releases help you as an author, rapid content releases of any kind just help you keep an engaged audience. So that's what my experiment is with them. Never as a moneymaker, just as an audience pleaser. But I have eventually, the first 2 became books, and those books have since paid for themselves. So I think they're a good idea and worth experimenting with.
All right. KU versus wide.
Okay, yeah. Bad experience with me and KU, so I'm definitely going to vote down KU, but I do see the logic of trying it, because the 3 of us, we got started writing and releasing books back when all the ebook and all the indies really started taking off. So me personally, I have a large following that is not just Kindle. So if I try to release just a book strictly Kindle, I'm going to get crucified, which I did when I released my first mystery, because That's where I decided to try KU, and that was where I learned my mistake. So I won't go down that road again. But for me, I just as soon try and get my book into everybody's hands, regardless of the platform they're running. So I deliberately will release all my titles wide, and will do so from now on. But I do think if you're a brand new author and you've only got one title out and you don't have a big following just yet, you can certainly give KU a try, because it'll probably work in your benefit.
Yeah, I'm on my second series. It's in Kindle Unlimited. All my fantasy was wide, and up until last summer, I hadn't done anything in Kindle Unlimited. For the reasons Jeff said, I already had a fan base on the other platform, so it was really hard to make that decision to go ahead and give it a try. But when I did it with that series, I also made the most money that summer of ever, like by a long shot, just because, in addition to sales, I was making almost as much in reads from Kindle Unlimited. And that series stuck really well. And, I've released stuff since then that hasn't stuck as well. So it's kind of hard. You don't know. That's why I just like writing a lot of stuff. Whatever your great plans are, it's hard to know ahead of time which one's going to really hit. But so I think it's just really beneficial right now and useful, and don't mind the sounds of the dog drinking. It's 82 degrees in the house and they're letting me know it. But just because what I said before with this borrows counting towards the sales ranking, even if you're not worried about the money, you're almost at a disadvantage right now if you're not in it, because other books in your category are being borrowed, and every time they're borrowed, it's like a sale in regard to deciding which ones are going to be in the top 100 or the top 20 and more visible. And if you're, people always say, well, you might be losing money from that if you're not getting sales, if people are borrowing instead. But a lot of those people who borrow wouldn't have bought your stuff. You may build up a fan base eventually and people will buy it, but I think people will borrow, just be like, oh, that cover looks cool, I'm going to go ahead and borrow that one and check it out, whereas if a book's $5, I'm going to grab the sample first, because I've been burned a lot of times and I'm a picky reader, so I want to make sure I enjoy it before I buy it. But I feel like those people are just like, oh, why bother with the sample? I'm just going to borrow it and check it out because I got 10 borrows a month. So it's tough not being in it. There are reasons not to go it, but I would almost probably launch everything in the future into KU if it's a new series and I think it has a shot of sticking. If it's kind of a spin-off, we talked about spin-offs last week, of an existing series, I might not bother. Or if it's a standalone that was just for fun and I don't think it's going to have a chance at sticking up there at the top of the rankings, then I might not bother too. But I would, at least launch into it for the 90 days and then kind of assess how things are going. I'm finally taking my series from last year out of Kindle Unlimited. We'll see if I get riots from the people who are in it and expect that the books in it will always be available to borrow. I did tell everybody, I was like, please borrow everything if you're in the middle of the series, because it won't just disappear. They'll still get to read it. But I think after the series has run its course, and maybe if it drops out of the top 10,000 or something, that may be when it's time to consider going wide and seeing. We've talked about before on here too, if you're hoping to get a book bub one day, it's going to be more, it seems like they're choosing books that are wide preferentially over books that are just on Amazon right now. So that becomes something to consider too.
Yeah, I haven't done any books wide, but I think I should say I have only done books wide. I haven't done any in KU, but I think my next book is going to be released in KU. It's a standalone, so there's not going to be any pre-existing audience to disappoint. But as it stands right now, just about half of my stuff is, but just about half of my money is made in non-Amazon locations. So in order for putting something in KU to make sense for me, because of where my audience is distributed, I would have to more than double my Amazon income, and that's entirely possible. And I guess we'll find out with the experiment. But for me, and for me specifically, being wide has been a very good choice. Plus, it's always wise to have more than one basket for your eggs. You never know when Amazon's going to pull a fast one, or maybe iBooks will pull a fast one. It's nice to be able to say you got more than one place to earn a buck.
I'd like to weigh in and definitely say here. You'll never know when Amazon's going to pull a fast one.
True. Your opinions on using a reader magnet?
Clarify that if you would.
the idea is you write either a short story, novella, or even a novel, and you give it out for free, and you use BookFunnel or InstaFreebie or something, and you add it to, and you connect it to your mailing address, your email address. They have to sign up for your email address, and then they can download the book for free, and they'll be on your mailing list.
And you've got their email address. Yeah.
And you've got
Anything that you do that could possibly get your book out into more people's hands, and especially collect those email addresses up front. Yeah, do what I didn't do, which was pay attention to a mailing list right when you start, because trust me, man, that it really comes in handy, especially for book releases. So I'd be all for it.
Yeah, it's not something I've done, but it's not because I think it's a bad idea. It's just that I already have a readership, and I kind of want to keep my mailing list. I've talked about it before on here that I have dog events going on today on the show. All right, somebody walked by the window. How rude. But yeah, I think that I would do it if I was starting out now, because we've had people on who started giving away like the first 3 chapters or pre. Why don't I pass it to Joe for a minute?
Sure. I am a big fan of giving stuff away on my mailing list as a reader magnet. At this point, I change up the perk. I call them newsletter perks. That's what my newsletter people know about. And I don't actually. It's almost more of a reward for staying on the mailing list for me than it is to get more people on. Obviously, anybody who reads any of my books are going to find the back matter that I mentioned that you can get a free book if you sign up. So it's a reader magnet in that way. But I don't do a lot of time pushing it to pull people in. I mostly just keep on refreshing to keep people interested in the mailing list. I think that's a great idea, and mailing lists are extremely useful to have. So anything you can do to maintain and grow it is a good idea.
Yeah,
so
incentives. Yeah, incentives are really good. I have the same thing on mine. I have a free short story just as an incentive for signing up, and I'll be doing the same thing, getting ready to swap out that short story for another one that I've written. So just to keep the people interested and continuing to sign up, because those email addresses are worth their weight in gold.
All right, I think I have a quiet moment. I can finish my answer. No, I was going to say, if I was starting out right now, I would definitely do that, like specifically write book 1, and then here's a prequel novella or something that really leads into the series really strongly with the same characters. And I'd definitely be doing something like InstaFreebie. I'd probably do that over perma-free these days to try to get some interesting people and get the ball rolling early on. It's so tough. I know when you're starting out right now to just knock it out of the park with a book 1, even no matter how great the cover is, and without kind of knowing some people who are going to plug it for you, that kind of thing, it's tough. And I think that would be a really good way right now to get started. And we've had people on the show who've said they've done it and it's worked. The only thing you have to worry about with that is you get a lot of people on your mailing list who may be kind of freebie seekers. If they're hanging out on InstaFreebie, they're looking for free stories. And some, it sounds like it's dependent on the author as to how well those people actually convert. I've heard people say like, yeah, it actually worked. They went on and bought my book 1. And I've heard other people say, these are just sitting on my mailing list. They never opened anything. And part of it might be the quality of what you're giving away. Like if it's a really good story and people get sucked into it, I think most people are going to be willing to give it a try. And I think probably a lot of the same audience is kind of the Kindle Unlimited audience too. So if you're launching into KU, although I don't know, because InstaFreebie can be anywhere in the world, and it could very well be people who are not in KU and need to get books really inexpensively. So maybe we could get somebody on someday who could talk to that. But I would definitely do it, totally try to get people to, and I kind of actually accidentally did that early on just by doing a short story and making it perma-free on Barnes & Noble and Smashwords. At the time, I didn't know how to make it perma-free on Amazon. This was before I knew the tricks and the ways. And it worked. Here was a free short story that had the same characters in it. And I said at the end, here's a couple pages excerpt of the book 1, and it's the same characters and how they met. And it was kind of the thing that got the ball rolling for me. So I definitely think that's worth trying.
Okay. The whole making the jump to being full-time writer, is there a metric or is it a completely individual?
Well, me personally, that is one hell of a jump. If you're assuming when making the jump, going to a full-time writer, as opposed to whatever your quote unquote day job is. I've noticed a lot of people that said they're going to make the jump because they had one spectacularly fantastic month. Well, it's like I say, it all depends if you're going KU or Y. Because if you're trusting in KU, I mean, if things are going well for you, great. But I would probably give it a good 6 months or so just to make sure everything's consistent. Build up the savings because as a writer, your income is going to fluctuate. Sometimes you'll have fantastic months. Sometimes it'll be slower than crap. And then you're going to go like, oh my God, I suck as a writer. No one's buying the books. But it just fluctuates. You've actually got to make sure you have a buffer built in. So for me, I mean, you need to make darn certain that you're having consistent sales for at least a number of months in a row before you even think about it. You just can't do the whole 1 month. I made a hellaciously lot of money in this 1 month. I'm going full time. Because 2-3 months later, it could just drop out on you, and then you're going to be hurting.
All right. Yeah, I think that it kind of depends a little bit on you and your circumstances too. If you've got a wife and kids and a mortgage, you may need to be a little safer than if it's just you and you're living with 3 roommates and pay $200 a month for rent, so something to consider. But I've also met people who, they did it before they really should have. If you just look at it as a rational, do you have 8 months savings, or you're going to be okay if something changes drastically. And sometimes having that fear is a really good motivator. Like, oh, I have to work every day now. I have to get a novel out every month or two. So maybe you kind of know how you work and what would be best for you. I do agree with Jeff in that things go up and down a lot. I've seen people that take off, it's like some people gradually build things up, and I think it's a little more steady and reliable actually when you do it that way. Sometimes people get a hit with book number 1 and that's awesome for them, but at the same time they can have this sense that it's always going to be that good. And a series has its life, and it's really hard to keep the same book 1 selling as well as it did on launch month. And once book 1 sales go down, even if you got an 8-book series, the other sales are going to go down too. So it's I would personally wait till you have like maybe 3 series out and you kind of the income's looking pretty steady month to month, or you're never dipping below a certain point. You can, maybe you look back over 12 months and see that, well, I always made at least 4,000 a month or 5,000 a month, whatever, depending on where you live and your circumstances, what you need. And if you have more money in the bank, then you have a little more comfort zone too. But we never know when Amazon is going to change the rules and the others could follow. So it's good to, make sure you're in a pretty good place before you take the jump.
Or flip us a bird.
Yeah, I'll give you the rundown that my accountant gave me when I was considering doing this. He was like, figure out what your monthly expenses are, not just now, but what they will be if you quit your job, because then you have to add in how you're going to do handling healthcare and stuff like that. And he was like, you want to have 6 months of those expenses in the bank, and you hopefully want to have some idea of the ebb and flow and the steady state of your earnings. And if you have all those in place and you can still make a living, then you have the option of quitting your job. That was his rundown. And I actually had way overestimated the amount of money I should have banked. I think I had 3 years salary basically banked up. So I could afford to have made a lot of mistakes early on and survived them. So I'm conservative in that way. But yeah, 6 months and a good idea of how much it's going to cost you to live once you make the jump. And if it looks good, then jump.
Okay. Something I don't have written down, but thought of it. Do you all still have a sort of imposter syndrome? Do you suffer from imposter syndrome? The feeling that, I don't believe I'm actually a writer, or I'm not an actual writer.
No, you know what? I never really considered that until I got the first email from a fan that says, I really love your books, and I'm sharing it with my family and friends. And then I started getting reviews. I started getting just people contact me saying, man, this is great. You said this is a trilogy. I hope you hope you're going to continue it. When the sales are good enough, and I can join like a SFWA, Science Fiction Writers of Association, all that jazz there. So I can join that. So I mean, you start thinking to yourself, okay, believe it or not, I'm actually a professional writer now. So it's a good feeling. But yeah, I had never really thought about it until I actually started hearing from total strangers that did not know me that said they really liked the book. So that's what worked for me.
I will say yes. I still feel like I'm not quite a real author. And it's funny because I've passed up opportunities to traditionally publish, not based on query letters or anything like that. But when you have a book selling well, sometimes you'll get somebody emailing you like, "Hey, I want to represent you," or "We published this and we're interested in that." And at the time, it was just like, I don't want to mess with the money. Once I'm able to be financially independent, and it doesn't matter if I take a big pay cut by going with trad publishing, I would certainly consider it to expand the audience reach. But I do feel that way. I'm like, I'm not quite the same as a author that's in the bookstores. And even with asking people to come on the podcast, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure they want to come on our show. I mean, that's an author I've been reading since the 80s or 90s, and especially when there are people that I read as a kid, it's kind of like, oh wow, that's a real author there. So I still have a little bit of that for sure.
I have nothing but imposter syndrome. I literally tweeted this morning. Every now and then I'll get an email that people think I'm a bigger deal than I really am. I every single day I have at least one thought. I'm like, why am I even trying to do this? If you were to look back at my Twitter history, you would see it took a very long time for me to refer to myself and as anything resembling an actual author. I use phrase like writer type person, or for a long time, my default description for what I was phony baloney author. So yeah, I do not have the confidence of a grown up author yet. Hopefully it'll show up eventually because it'll make living and thinking a lot easier.
We're going to get you two out of your introverted shells yet. You realize this.
Well, it's funny too, if I don't know about you guys, but I've been asked to speak before at conferences, but it's always like about self-publishing and writing. It's not like, I don't know, the sci-fi and fantasy conventions, it seems to be trad publishing, unless you like kind of schmooze and go to the things and talk to people and get on their radar, I think. But I don't think I've ever been asked to come out, talk about dragons and magic and whatever. I don't even know what they talk about at these things, but as an introvert, I always decline things anyway. But I would be on a panel. I always tell people, like, if you just need somebody on a panel, that would be pretty easy, but I'm not going to go talk for an hour for free or the cost of admission. I'm like, no, I could be writing a novel then.
I don't care if you're extrovert or introvert. Not many people like talking in front of an actual big live audience. I mean, I was actually approached once, like, would you think of if we did this? Would you consider it? I'm like, and I still consider myself an introvert, but my other job was forcing me to, step out of the box and actually talk to the people there. So the other part of me is like, yeah, it wouldn't be too bad, but yeah, I'll worry about that if this situation ever develops. And thankfully, it never did. But my first response was, but I was like, okay, I maybe. That was my answer to the guy.
I think if you have to sell something, like if you really believe that you can sell a bunch of books by being out there and talking, you're more motivated to do it. Whereas I'm like, thank goodness for the internet. I don't have to do stuff like that to sell books. I can just do perma-free and buy a book pub. One hopes anyway.
Okay. Let's see. A fun one. If you could switch places with any character from anything you've written, who would it be and why?
Switching characters. I have not that I want to be female, but this female character of mine in the stories that I've created has the magical ability of teleportation. I think that would be as cool as hell to be able to like do this little nose wiggle thing and you're someplace else. So if I had that power, that's the one I would choose. And so, I mean, the male person, he's got a nice strong fire, throwing type of ability there, but I really like the teleportation. That's pretty cool. Don't tell my wife I said that because that's her power.
All right, cool. Jeff wants to be a girl, and I want to be a dragon. I give my human characters too much grief. They don't ever get to be super awesome, but I've got this dragon that thinks he's a god. He would be fun just to be able to fly, and like that'd be awesome. That'd be my character.
I thought for certain you'd choose Sicarius or something.
I don't want to be an assassin. What the heck? That's not fun. How does killing people become fun?
Someone annoys you, like just have knives all over them. I can think of 50 different ways I can slit your throat there, dude. You better be nice.
Well, actually, just knowing somebody that can do that is better because then you don't get in trouble. You just be like, hey, dude, take care of that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, for me, in my Big Sigma series, there's a sociopath mad engineer whose name is Carter. He basically has infinite money and owns his own planet, and he's smart enough to invent, whatever tickles his fancy. He created a genetically engineered species called the Funk specifically for pun potential. So it seems like he'd be a lot of fun to be. Plus, he lives an almost perfectly consequence-free life because he's sort of shepherded around by an artificial intelligence who solves his problems for him. So definitely the mad engineer, Carter.
Awesome. Do you see more indies going down the idea of right to market or doing their own thing?
Well, I've always wanted to try a right to market title because everyone, we've had numerous people on here. I won't name names, but we have numerous people who say, this is really the way to sell a whole lot of books there, and I've contemplated it, but I'm more for writing something that I really want to write. I don't want someone dictating me. Okay, well, just because people are talking about glittery vampires, that's what I should write about. Oh, it ain't gonna happen. Not now, not ever. I'll keep with what I like, and thankfully, I've got a fan base that likes what I'm doing. So. Not for me, not yet, anyways.
I have many times contemplated it, especially when I see somebody come out of nowhere and like do this urban fantasy series or something where they're just selling a bajillion books overnight. And talk about imposter syndrome. I still get jealous. I've like had great years. Nobody could, say, oh, that sucked. You didn't make any money last year. And I would be totally envious of somebody that's just like killing it with a series that I'm watching. Like, man, I should write something like that. It would totally sell. But I think if I'm really honest with myself, if I tried to write to market, I don't really think it would work. And I think I'd then just be bitter and jaded. And so I don't really think I have a pulse on what's popular, even in the geek community or those of us who enjoy science fiction and fantasy. I feel fortunate that enough people like the kind of things that I like that I'm able to make a nice living as an author. And maybe someday I'll try it, but I probably would not tell anyone I was trying it. I'd just be like, oh, if it took off afterwards, I totally wrote that to market. Absolutely. If it didn't take off, oh no, I didn't even try to write that to market. Are you kidding? I don't do that. I am so above writing to market. So there's my honest truth.
Yeah, I think you're going to continue to see people on both sides of it. I mean, writing to market is a skill that not everyone is going to have. Everyone can write the story they want to write, or at least they can try to write the story they want to write, but not everyone is going to have what it takes to really nail what's popular at the moment. So I think, personally, I feel like the reason to be an indie author is to make sure that the absolute book that you wanted to hit the shelves hits the shelves. But if you want to make a ton of money and you can pull it off, then I think there's still going to be tons of people writing to market, and rightly so. So both sides. I'm splitting the middle on that one.
I gotcha. And last question I really have you noticed the difference in your writing or advice for writers, indies, whatever, from the beginning of the podcast to now?
Well, we've been learning lots of stuff. Me personally, one of the things I've learned, I picked up, and obviously quite a few people always say the same thing. Mailing lists are important, and literally right near the beginning of this podcast, I actually started working on my mailing list. I've got it up, quite well. And I also have, instead, I always used to look for beta readers, just, hey, is there any volunteers? But now a lot of people have suggested that, hey, why don't you come up with some sort of like special Facebook group, and then we'll just get some dedicated fans that are willing to help you out. So I call them my posse members there. And now every time I've got an idea or I need to run something by them or they're ready to beta read, all I got to do is drop that right into that Facebook group, and damn, they take it off with it. So yeah, I mean, it's learning lots. And every time someone asks me like, hey, okay, what would you do with regards to brand new author getting ready to do this? I'm like, well, if you were to do this like 5 years ago, my my advice would be different. But nowadays, maybe you might want to consider, as much as I hate KU, maybe you might want to consider KU, or maybe do this or that. But yeah, it's all the info is starting to pay off, mostly.
I think we started around fall of 2014. So I think probably at the beginning, and I think the guys and I kind of have the same background, so we're probably saying about the same thing. We're saying more, do a perma-free book one, And I say that's an option now, especially if you're going to go wide, because it does seem to still work in the other stores. But I think going into KU with the first series would be more my advice now, and that's probably what we've been telling people the last year or two. You can still go wide. It's not impossible, but it does seem to help a lot of people. And I will say, if you're going to do the Insta freebie reader magnet thing, though, now that I had more time to think about that, that might be a little tougher if you're planning to go into exclusivity with Amazon, because I think you're going to get readers from, I think it's kind of the way Smashwords used to be, and still is, where it's very international, and I think the reason I have a lot of international readers today is because I started with Smashwords, and they just put everything out everywhere. And I feel like Insta freebie might be kind of that way. And then so you might have some people that are like, well, I got this free one, but I have to go to Amazon to buy the book. I'm in Norway and I only shop at whatever, Kobo or Smashwords or something. So that's something to consider. But that was a little wandering off on a tangent. Surprise, surprise. So I would say the same advice that we've given all along, though, just keep writing books, make them entertaining, and keep putting stuff out regularly. I think that's still good advice and still works.
Yeah, I think a lot of the advice that I give still goes. I mean, build your mailing list and all that. I agree with it. KU has become an increasingly intelligent option for somebody first starting off. But the other thing that I think has changed a lot, especially in the last few years, is there's a lot more like services and infrastructure that I've been recommending, like BookFunnel and like that. It seems like the industry has sort of been growing up around the indies to sort of facilitate what we've been doing. A lot of the stuff you used to have to pull on your own. And now, you set yourself up with MailChimp, and then you get a BookFunnel account and you use that for a reader magnet. Like, there's an entire supply chain almost that you can set up. So I sort of have a Rolodex of services that I throw into my recommendations, along with what the others have said about this.
All right, that's it for my questions. So.
All right, cool. Thanks for coming on and asking them. Do you have anything specific about your novel that you wanted to pick our brains about, or serials or anything like that?
Geez.
Oh, good. Put them on the spot.
Yeah.
You do not have to come up with anything. It's fine.
Well, I mean, it's actually right now I'm working on something different. There's something that an indie author that has been even on your show before, Chris Fox. He did something called a 12-week to a trilogy. He
definitely had him on, I think, 3 times.
3 times. Well, he did this challenge. He just finished it, and I'm actually partway through it right now. And I'm writing a 3-part space opera, and that's hard, to say the least. And I'm sort of stuck on, I don't know if I should go back and keep working on book 1 or jump to book 2 or even go to book 3 right now.
All right. Well, that's kind of hard to know without knowing what.
No, I know.
Like if you had like a plot thing that was going to really change the way books 2 and 3 turned out, then maybe you would have to go back and address that before kind of figuring out how things are going to go on. If you have it all outlined and you pretty much know how the story is going to go, and it's just some small things, I definitely would not go back. I would just keep writing, finish it. That's how I tell people to do a novel. I'm like, don't go back and edit anything. Just make a note to yourself that when you finish the rough draft, okay, there was this thing back here in chapter 3, I got to change this. And then it's really easy when you're editing just to kind of change that thing and address things as you go along on that kind of your second pass. So I feel like I've known so many people, like in writers' workshops and stuff, that have rewritten the first 10 chapters of their novel over and over and again. And I would definitely just really, I mean, like I said, unless it's some huge thing and you just don't know how you're going to make it work, I would just try to push on and finish the rough drafts of all 3. And sometimes you find, because I've done this too a couple times now, where you're world building and kind of figuring it out on the fly, you'll find things out about the world in book 3 that you then want to add into book 1 as you go back and edit that. So I think it's really great to do the whole trilogy like that. It sounds cool, and I would do it. I basically do it. I just don't do trilogies. It's the start of a series usually for me. But I think it's a good idea to knock it all out, and then you've got that rough thing to work with. So it's it's easier than not having anything to work with. It's much harder to edit when there's nothing to edit.
Mhm.
All right, so while I'm thinking about this, let me go ahead and ask the viewer question that we had from Lars. He was saying, I'm going to read it the way he wrote it, and let's see if I can translate it here. With all the perma-free books that are out there, with all the 99-cent offers, and he's noticed that there's box sets of 4 to 12 or more books that are often free or for 99 cents. He sees authors offering a huge series for that amount, and it's all about box sets to keep the business going. Is the market heading towards serious saturation?
You're writing in one of the romance categories, aren't you, Lars? That's where I see those 12 books for 99 cents. I think you can still compete against those guys, especially when people are doing KU. It doesn't matter to them whether it's one book for $5.99 or 12 books for 99 cents. They're getting it for the same. They're $10 a month. And, it's different readers that are going to be attracted to a higher price book and a 99-cent box set. I think some of the things with those box sets is kind of a pain, having to go through the table of contents and figure out, especially when they get like 20 books in them, which one sounded like one you wanted to read. So I see what you're saying. There's a lot more competition out there. There's always people talking about, driving down the price overall. And you can kind of see what's going on in your, if you browse the top 100 of your category on Amazon, see what the trends are with pricing. But I don't feel you have to have 10 novels and give them away for 99 cents in order to make anything work. Keep in mind that with those people right now in Kindle Unlimited, if they are in Kindle Unlimited, they're getting paid for the page reads. So it's not actually that they're only making 35 cents. They could be making $10 for, those box sets if people flip through to the end. So I think right now it's still up to 3,000 pages you can get credit for in each book. So that's probably, I don't know, somebody else can do the math, but I would think you're making about $10 per read if somebody reads through the end or flips through to the end. So it can be discouraging, but I think there's still always going to be readers who are willing to pay for, look at this cool one book and look, it has a good blurb and it sounds like a good premise. So stay out of the paranormal romance vampire categories, though. That's where those bargain hunters want those 10 99-cent books. And I apologize if that's your category. It's a tough one.
He already mentioned in the chat that's not his category.
Okay, well, that's where I see it all the time, is in those paranormal romance categories, and so not that it won't necessarily come, but
we have a second viewer question from Jin, who says, "How far ahead do you plot your series books?" And as for me, I do it one at a time. I just keep adding. This would be cool to add to this series, sort of thing. But if I do a trilogy, obviously I've already got the books mapped out for each individual book. But a series where there's no definitive end novel in place, I'll write it out as I go.
Joe, do you want to go first on this one, since I've been blabbing a lot?
Sure. I tend to when I do a new series, I will plot the first 3 books and write them and release them. And then depending on how the series is going, I'm not a cliffhanger anymore. I'll put a sequel hook at the end of the 3rd book. And depending on how the series is going, I will then plot story arcs, which are usually 2 or 3 books. Although that's how I do it now. It's not how I started. How I started was 1 book at a time with sequel hooks in each one, and then try desperately to tie all those hooks together with the 3rd book in the series. And fortunately, it worked out okay.
I will definitely outline the first one, and then I usually just have notes on the 2nd and 3rd one when I get started. And I have it in my head how the series is going to end. I can find a way there generally if I have that part planned out. With the pen name, I'm working on the sci-fi romances. Those are, interestingly, the series I'm doing this time is kind of a Voyager, Star Trek Voyager thing where it spans several books and they have to find their way home. So that one's requiring a little more actual thinking about further ahead as I write, but I outline the first one and then notes for the next ones in the series. I will say, here's a secret: if you need to order your covers ahead of time, do something like calling your series by the name of the character that's going to star in that book, because I didn't know the plots at all, and they were like, oh, well, what's going to happen in book 5? And I think I have no idea, but here's the guy that's going to be the hero in it, so let's just name it after him. Probably not good for epic fantasy and things like that, but if you are like me and challenged when it comes to coming up with titles, and if you have to order, if you get a discount for ordering your cover art all at once, or if you're working with someone who's booked many months out, sometimes it helps to say, let me just book you for 3 covers in August. And anyway, off on a tangent as usual. Are we all caught up on questions there?
Yep, I believe so.
All right. Do you have any more questions for us, Lon?
Actually, just one real quick one. I think I've gotten the answer already, but plotter or pantsers?
I like plotting things out. I've got my notebooks for every single book I've ever written, and I still have them somewhere around here. But yeah, I mean, I don't plot out every last little detail, but essentially I know what's going to happen in the book. I'll break it down the chapters, and then I'll flush out each chapter as I get to it. And granted, sometimes it makes a little bit of a tweaking to move chapters around a bit, but for the most part, I stick to it.
I started out as a pantser and gradually came to see the wisdom of outlining, mostly because I finished the books a lot more quickly and I didn't have to shuffle things around or rewrite scenes later on. So it was sort of probably about the time I went full time. I was like, if I want to write books quickly and keep them coming out, this is more efficient for me.
I also started off as a pantser, and now I'm with each new book, I'm getting more and more skilled at the plotting. But as I mentioned before, the thing started to Lindsay, occasionally I'll write myself in a corner still because I'll wander wherever the story seems to want to take me and then realize it doesn't hit point B anymore. So mostly a plotter now, but with lots of bad pantser habits.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, if that's it for questions, well, we managed to talk for almost an hour here. We appreciate everybody listening and appreciate you coming on, Lon. Could you remind us the name of your novel and let us know where people can find you?
The name of the novel is Mostly Human, and I do have a website. It's lonvarnadoreauthor.com. LONVARNADORE author.com.
All right, cool. And I will put the link to your site and your book in the show notes. This is episode 133 at Marketing SFF. So come on by if you're interested. And your first book is free right now, right?
Yes, it is perma-free.
Or your only novel, but you have several things out. Yeah. People can check it out with no requirement for anything. Good deal.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for coming on. And
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.